Hello, my name is Alan Wellen. This is a presentation for a tool that I wrote for DSU's CSC 842 security tool development. So this is a script that I call GoTime. So I have done a lot of hack the box exercises. Hack the box is a very popular website that you can go and test your pen testing skills against a wide variety of machines that are essentially puzzles in a lot of ways. So you have to connect into the VPN, interact with the machine, attempt to exploit it or leverage some vulnerabilities in some manner to get some combination of a user flag and a root flag from the target. So I found that I was often doing a lot of the same setup and a lot of the same configuration every time I swapped from working on one machine to another machine. So I wrote this to try to kind of streamline and standardize the way I was working from one machine to another. So the script is relatively straightforward on the surface. You provide an IP address and the name of the host. So within Hack the Box's website, you spin up VPN or you spin up the machines. They give you an IP address. The machines all have individual names, and they are on one of several VPNs. So in this case, I have a directory of all of the different labs that you can connect into that machine might be in based upon how Hack the Box has decided to categorize that particular VM. So in this case, we'll kick it off. So we give it the IP address of the target. So this is all on another screen on my system. And the name of the host. So in this case, I'm going to do tac demo. So it kind of pauses here and there so I can talk through what's going on. Obviously, normally you just have it blow through everything. So first thing it does is obviously it prepares for what you're going to start doing. So I have everything that I do on my Kali system routed out through a VPN connection for personal privacy reasons. So I don't want the lab network to be able to identify where my home address is. So GoTime gives you reaches out to a website to get your external IP address. So in this case, this is through a particular VPN provider. Next thing it does is it looks for any running OpenVPN processes. In this case, it didn't find any, so it just happily attempted to spawn one for me. So by default, it assumes that you want the lab VPN. Otherwise, you can provide part of the name of one of the other VPNs and it will use that one instead. So I have to provide my root password because to run OpenVPN you have to sudo. So I usually, once I've connected into the VPN, I usually shove this off into another workspace so I can come over here and check on it to make sure it's fine, but it's out of my way. Very nice feature of Kali or a lot of Linux systems in general. Another thing that it does is it grabs the whatever your ton 0 interface is, which is the one that's connected into the lab. And I have a particular script in my home directory called target.sh that hasn't updated yet, but up here in the corner it just now updated. It gives me the name of the host and the IP address so that as I'm working through the different workspaces or as I'm flipping through various windows as things start to get a little cluttered, I always have a space on the system I can look to check what my IP is or what the IP I'm going against is. So this is outside of the realm of the script, but this is just a basic panel that you can set up within Kali that you can just have it display the output of a script, and the script is just literally catting that particular information. So moving on, it creates a home directory for the system. So in this case, it just simply assumes that your home directory is where you want the logs to be. That's another thing you can configure in the command line, after which it pops open Wireshark. So you can tell the script not to start Wireshark. I generally prefer to have Wireshark open because I find that if I'm having issues with a tool, having a Wireshark already up and running is very useful to me. So I'm going to go ahead and shove this off again into another workspace. I usually shove my Wireshark off into either workspace 2 or workspace 3, depending on how I feel. Next thing it does is the script will update Etsy hosts. So there are a lot of cases, because these are dynamically assigned IPs on HackTheBox's side. Most of the time, the person that originally created the VM may have given it a host name that you have to use for different enumeration techniques. So it's very common for them to use the name of the host, as in the name of the host in the HackTheBox registry, .htb as the domain. So we just shove that into Etsy hosts on the off chance it's either useful for the script or useful for you. And of course, interacting with Etsy hosts requires your sudo password again. Next, we attempt to ping the host to make sure that it's up. Which, out of paranoia, of course, it's not working immediately. So while that runs, I have a previous run over here. So this is for a different box. So the one we're currently scanning on the left side is Pilgrimage. This host was Topology. So we are essentially at this point over on the other side where we are attempting to ping the target. By default, it will try 10 times with 5-second sleeps between, so about 50 or so seconds. In this last case, it succeeded after 15 seconds. It will then go through and map the target. So for anything that we're running on the command line, either through os.system or through the subprocess module, we always output the arguments, and you can see over on the left, we finally successfully connected. So we have all the nmap command line arguments. So nmap's the first thing we run. This host still doesn't seem to be behaving properly, so we're just going to let that hang out for a little bit. It may be a case of the... Oh, I see what happened. So this is a case of I did not connect to the correct VPN. So this should actually be the release. So we'll now show what it looks like when it finds a VPN. So in this case, because we're switching from the lab to the release VPN, it says, hey, I found these other open VPN PIDs. You want to kill them? The answer is yes. Connect it back into our VPN. It says, hey, I already see that there's Wireshark running. Do you want to start a new one? So in this case, Wireshark gets really angry every time you kill the interface it's actually listening on. So in this case, we're going to come over here, close Wireshark. Yes, we would like to start a new Wireshark. And again, we will shove that guy over out of the way. And here we go. So this time our ping instantly succeeded and we're off to the races, conducting our nmap scan. So as I was saying, so with the nmap scan, we are going to look for all ports. We are going to attempt to run some basic scripts, and we're going to output everything into our target info directory. So we output in essentially the format that gets displayed to screen, in an XML format, which the script uses as it flows through, and then in a grep format, which you as someone who is working with the data may or may not find useful. So coming back over to our live scan, now that the demo is essentially working, we'll continue on. So after nmap is done, the script will parse that XML output to try to identify services that we know that we have already set up follow-on scans for. So in this case, I have written follow-on scans for web and for LDAP. This particular target does not have LDAP, it just has SSH and HTTP. So it says, hey, we found this HTTP port. It just throws everything we know about it to screen. I'm a huge fan of verbosity in output, so it shoves everything at you, and then it will start running through the scan. So any of these scans you can specifically disallow on the command line. So there is a tac skip option. So this is not dynamically built, so if more is added, this will have to be manually updated. But you can either skip all web scans or one of the specific web scans, either because you don't have that tool or you don't want to run it. So right now it's running Nikto, which is a web scanner, after which it'll run skipfish, and then it will attempt to run bbot, which is another spider. So because this runs really slow, we'll just kind of let it run as we go along, and then we'll continue talking through some of the output over here. So in this case, Nikto ran through. Again, we have all our output, or we have our command lines output to the screen. We save all of the responses that Nikto receives into their own files, and then the screen output into a file. Skipfish, unfortunately, is really obnoxious and overwrites information on the console, so we actually shove that off into another window, which may or may not pop up on us as the live scan runs. But regardless, we have it output all of the responses that it gets into, again, our log directory. So we ask it to generally attempt to scan against the host name, because that tends to work a little bit better rather than the IP address. Then we run bbot, which is, if you're not familiar, it is a OSINT tool. I saw it demoed at DakotaCon 2023, and I thought it was pretty cool. I won't show it off here in any detail, but essentially it is designed to, you point it at a target. In this case, we are giving it both the IP address and the host name, or the DNS name, and it will run through a wide variety of scans and will use each of those returns to feed back into itself. So it will essentially recursively run until it runs out of information. So in this case, we do limit it to the specific hosts, so it won't go out of scope. So it will only scan information on that IP address and only spider on that IP address. But again, we have it all output everything into our output directory, which it shows towards the bottom. So this runs through. There's a point where, depending on which scans it's running, sometimes it requires a sudo password, which unfortunately usually the request gets buried, so you just have to pay attention when it happens. And that's essentially it. In this case, it didn't find any LDAP data against topology, so it didn't output anything. So here is our output directory. So you see we have some backup host files as it was swapping hosts in and out. We have our nmap data, so if we need to look back at what our original nmap output looked like, or if we wanted to grep through the nmap data looking for whether or not a particular port was open, or if we need to programmatically look through the output from nmap, we can do that. We have all of our Nikto and skipfish responses. So skipfish is not one that I've honestly played with much, but it will go through and log all of the returns in a somewhat confusing directory structure, but it's all there for you to kind of work with. This is the skipfish output that I was complaining about. So it'll time out automatically after 60 seconds and just run, or we can tell it to run there, and we'll just let that spin as we continue. And then finally the bbot output. So there'll be a subdirectory in most cases for each port that we scan. So if both 80 and 443 are open, or if there's some high ephemeral that a particular service like Jira or something is running on, those will be in their own directory, so it won't clobber based upon the host. It'll clobber based upon the host and port. So some of these are going to be more useful than others. The word cloud probably not going to be particularly useful in a lot of cases. One fun thing is one of the scans that bbot will run is Go Witness, which will automatically screenshot the pages that it's enumerating. So in a lot of cases, for larger, like, complex sites where you have to like fuss around with different aspects of the website to get execution, it's nice to kind of have a record of what the website looked like at various points. So that is the tool. Again, most of the features you can disable if you need to. So if you don't want to run bbot because you just don't like or need the output, you can exclude it. It does attempt to test whether or not you have the different tools installed. So if, for example, or whatever reason you didn't have Nikto installed, it does a witch on Nikto, and if it doesn't find Nikto, it'll skip it automatically and output a failure message to the screen, so it's not like it's going to explode. You can tell it don't run Wireshark. You can say, hey, I've already run nmap, just use the stored results. You can have it skip the VPN checks. I added in a TAC update option, so it'll run git update and the full upgrade and auto remove just for a convenience. I usually, if I've let the VM sit for like a week or two, I usually like to refresh all the tools before I continue. Again, if you want to change the specific log directory, you can do that, or if you choose to store your VPN configs in a different spot, you can do that. So that is GoTime. I hope that it is useful and you enjoy the tool.